right.
Welcome to the QB List Fantasy Football Podcast. I'm Colin Weatherwax, joined as always by Erik Smith. We are here to discuss some big news that came out yesterday. We were already had this podcast planned to kind of talk about the rookie running backs and the drafting and seeing if we wanted to pay up for some of these rookie running backs. And what do you know? We get a bombshell late last night of Damien Williams opting out of the season. So that kind of transitioned us right into our first segment. But before we get started, you can find me on Twitter at cweatherwax13. Erik is at Erik Smith QBL. And Erik, how are you doing today?
I'm doing good, Colin. I figured we'd try a daytime one of those. You had the day off, so you just got to put your feet up all day and play the show. So I'm a little jealous of you. But yeah, I'm doing good. Just trying to roll with all these opt outs, all these COVID 19 testing notifications. And it's pretty wild. I think there's more to come, but people might need us more than ever this year to keep up with everything.
Yeah, it's going to be a crazy off season. I know you've been saying that in the Discord pretty much the whole time. Just with all the opt outs, with all the craziness of the scheduling. So yeah, I mean it's gonna be crazy leading up to the start of the season. Obviously, no preseason games this year either, so we don't even get to see some guys that we're interested in perform on the preseason field before we go and spend a first, second, or third round pick on some of these rookie guys that we'll talk about today. But whenever we're looking at these guys, there's a whole lot of talent. There's just do they have enough time to get up to speed with the playbook? This is going to be their first year in the league. So we're going to kind of dive right into those running backs, the rookie running backs this year and their situations. But let's start it off with the Kansas City Chiefs. I mean, Clyde Edwards-Helaire, he's been a huge topic the past 24 hours on Twitter due to Damien Williams opting out of the 2020 season. So he's a guy for me that I wasn't interested in prior to Damien Williams opting out. I was actually in on Damien Williams as a later round pick. But you, on the other hand, were kind of interested in him. And now with the news of Damien Williams sitting out the season, that's kind of piqued your interest even more. And you might be willing to pay that extraordinarily high price on CEH. So what are your thoughts on that whole situation in Kansas City?
Right. So first, I'll say Ryan Heath put up a good quick reaction piece this morning on the site why Clyde Edwards-Helaire in the first round is a mistake. I don't think he's a mistake in the first round necessarily. I will say, looking at the NFFC online championships, just a couple that have drafted, or actually just all of their drafts, a couple that have drafted in the last 2 days. Edwards-Helaire is going on average at pick 7 in the first round. I think that's too high for me, but just for the just for debate, I do think that he's worth a first round pick. I just wouldn't take him up at 7. So I do agree somewhat with Ryan's piece that I don't know how much Damien Williams sitting out really impacts him. I mean, he's still going to have veterans on the roster to compete with him, and I'm not sure that Clyde Edwards-Helaire is an 80% snap running back anyway. I think he's more in the 60% range. You're just getting those awesome targets from Patrick Mahomes that are worth a ton in a PPR league. So we're kind of both of us are going to have to pick one of these in these backfields we talk about. This one is either Clyde Edwards-Helaire at ADP of 7, just in a few small sample size drafts, or just any of the other Chiefs running backs, DeAndre Washington, Darrell Williams, or Darwin Thompson. I'm going to go with Clyde Edwards-Helaire with a big asterisk, pick 7. That's a little early for me. I'm going to take the Kenyon Drake, Miles Sanders, Joe Mixon's ahead of him. But if Clyde Edwards-Helaire is there at the end of the first round, I'm certainly looking at him because, as we've all seen in all these drafts, running backs are flying off the board. If you don't get one in the first round, you better get one in the second round unless you're really embracing that zero running back strategy, which is a valid strategy. But if you don't get one quick, you might as well wait for a while. So I'm willing to take Edwards-Helaire towards the end of the first round. I think beginning of the second, we'll see as kind of news comes out. But I just think the upside is huge. He's going to get targets from Patrick Mahomes. And, I mean, Damien Williams was good last year when he was healthy. And I know, there were times where he was battling with LaShawn McCoy and some other kind of washed up players. And we're worried that they're going to do that with Edwards-Helaire, but he's a first-round pick. Damien Williams was an undrafted free agent that they ended up with from Miami. I just think it's a different tier of athlete we're talking about here. So like I said, I'm not going to be taking Edwards-Helaire at pick 7, but I'm willing to debate you on this because I don't think we should be as afraid of Edwards-Helaire just because he's a rookie as the other side seems to be making us think.
So are you going to take him over my boy Miles Sanders?
No, I'll go Miles Sanders over him.
Okay.
I'm looking at, let's see, last 2 weeks online. Miles Sanders is picked 10 overall. Joe Mixon is 11. I think once you get to 12, which is like Tyreek Hill, Hopkins, Chubb, Aaron Jones, that's where it starts getting a little more interesting. So that's where I'm looking at him, I think. That doesn't mean there aren't teams where I'm going to take, DeAndre Hopkins or maybe Devontae Adams falls. I might take them over him sometimes, but I think he's in play there at the end of the first round.
So for me, the Chiefs running back position, I think is just a little bit too, overblown. Just because they're in a Patrick Mahomes offense, I understand that offense is going to be elite. However, last year, LaShawn McCoy and Damien Williams combined to barely over 1,000 yards. They weren't efficient and they were not, touchdown hogs or anything like that. And then people like to debate on Twitter about Kareem Hunt's year whenever Mahomes threw for 50 touchdowns in 2018. But I'm looking at that year. He started 11 games before he got suspended. He had 824 yards and 7 touchdowns on the ground, which, okay, if you put that out, then maybe he gets to like 1,300 on the ground, maybe 10 touchdowns. But I'm looking at the receiving, and he only had 26 receptions on 35 targets. Now, he did convert those into 7 touchdowns, which if he had a full season, we would be clamoring that is due to regress. 7 touchdowns on 26 receptions is not something that's going to last even in a Patrick Mahomes offense. So I think for me, in this offense, I think it's Travis Kelce. I think it's Tyreek Hill. There's a lot of people that were kind of on the Sammy Watkins bandwagon last year just because he's the wide receiver 2 in a Patrick Mahomes offense. But we saw how that played out after week 1. After week 1, week 1 he blew up, but then after that, nothing really happened for him. So I'm kind of nervous that kind of is how the running back position is going to be on the Kansas City offense as well. So that being said, I put in the Discord today, I'd rather have Austin Eckler over Clyde Edwards-Helaire. Who is currently going as RB13 off the board, pick number 17 with a min pick of 14, so double the min pick of Clyde Edwards-Helaire. Now, I do expect that Edwards-Helaire is going to be a first-round pick in pretty much all the NFFC drafts especially whenever we get closer to the start of the season. But I will say that after the Miles Sanders, Joe Mixon, top 9 running backs, there is a little bit of a bunched, tier for me. We have Nick Chubb, who has to split time with Kareem Hunt. We don't know how that's going to work out. We have Aaron Jones coming off of a career year, especially in the touchdown category, which is due to regress as well. Josh Jacobs for my Las Vegas Raiders. As for fantasy for Josh Jacobs, I am a little nervous because of all the weapons that they drafted. Lynn Bowden, I think that he's going to come in and steal some time away from him. I do think that Josh Jacobs is going to be the one guy in the red zone for them, but I wouldn't be surprised, if he came in and took some snaps away from Josh Jacobs and definitely cut into his receiving, output as well. And then, like I said, Austin Eckler. So I think I'm going to be out on Clyde Edwards-Helaire just because the fact that I don't think the running back position on that offense is as important. Especially for Andy Reid and how Patrick Mahomes likes to play as well. And I also like some of the other players going, even after him in the running back position.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of concerns with those running backs there. Aaron Jones, touchdown regression. Jacobs, you listed those. Eckler, I mean, he doesn't have Phillip Rivers just feeding him dump-off passes all day. We'll see how.
Oh, Tyrod's great at that. He's great at dumping off the ball.
Yeah, but he hasn't had that volume that Rivers has had in the past. So I don't know. There's definitely question marks there. I just think, CEH is going to have a nice floor, right? I mean, you look at some of these, the weeks that Damien Williams was healthy, he's getting 4, 5, 6 targets a game. I mean, if we can give those to CEH, I think he's going to have a nice floor. I do understand the pushback where maybe he's not The type of back that's just, he's not going to be Saquon Barkley in his rookie year. You know what I mean? He's not that complete every down back like that that's just going to get massive amounts of volume. So I can understand the pushback that maybe he doesn't have that RB1 overall upside. But I think he's going to have a nice floor, and who knows, maybe he just catches fire with Mahomes and just blows up in his rookie year. I'm less worried about running backs in the rookie year than just about any other position. So obviously he's got to be able to pass protect, but if they send him out on routes, then he doesn't have to worry about that either. So I don't know. I think he's got a decent floor, and there is a lot of upside. I just think Ryan posted his article on Reddit today, and there were a lot of people on the CEH side comparing him to Zeke and Saquon coming into the league. That's where I push back. He's not that kind of prospect. Those were top picks in the NFL draft, both of them. They were obviously going to be dependable 3-down backs, and CEH is not that. But I think in the modern NFL and this offense, maybe I end up sliding him down more in the 15 overall range. But I think he's really close to that first round, and I'm willing to argue for him just because of the upside there.
See, like you said, though, he's not a top NFL talent. He wasn't picked at the top end of the draft. So projecting that nice floor, like you said, for CEH, I think is a little risky because he's a rookie. There's a whole bunch of, nuances with this offseason, which, of course, a lot of people are going to talk about, them not being able to work out. When are they going to be able to go in and actually practice and run routes and take handoffs from Patrick Mahomes? So that's another thing to consider. But for me, I'm just kind of looking at, the guys around him, and I don't want to project a rookie floor like that, because I think the rookie floor is like what we saw with Darwin Thompson last year. The hype was insane. And what did he do for you? He was a cut in week number 2 because he had no role. And then there's also the added factor of, okay, CEH is the only guy in that backfield right now. I know you mentioned, DeAndre Washington, Darrell Williams as well, but do we really think that the Kansas City Chiefs are going to go into a season with CEH being the only running back that they can really trust? I saw a couple things in the Discord where Devontae Freeman's probably about to get a call from them. Spencer Ware, who they always go back to, each and every year. So I could see, a scenario where CEH is actually splitting time with a veteran as well. And I know right now the hype is a little bit out of control. And I do think if they go in and they sign a veteran, I do still think there's going to be people that are taking him in the first round, but he might continue to slip down a little bit more, especially if they'd sign a guy like Devontae Freeman or someone like that. But for me, I'm staying away for now, just based on what Damien Williams, LaShawn McCoy, Darrell Williams were able to do last year in this very highly productive offense, and even in 2018 with Kareem Hunt just kind of being unsustainable in the passing game. I just don't know if I want to spend a first round pick or an early second round pick on a guy like this, where I'm really unsure what I'm going to be getting.
Yep. And I'll just say, like we said, this was only 3 drafts since last night on NFFC. These were a variety of drafts, but he went anywhere from pick 2 to 13 last night, Clyde Edwards-Helaire. So even just saying back of the first round, it sounds like an overreaction, but people are obviously overreacting more than that. So it's going to get crazy over the next few weeks, seeing where he goes. I bet he settles in around the 7 to 12 range, but so if you're not taking Clyde Edwards-Helaire, that means you're taking the other Chiefs running backs. I think they're all pretty much going 15th round or later. We'll see how that shakes out. But do you have a favorite out of Washington, Williams, or Thompson? You probably had a pretty good view of Washington in Oakland last year.
Yeah, I liked Washington. He's been on the team for the past 3 years. I liked, the flashes that he had. But like I said, I don't think that these are the 3 guys that are going to be the ones that we're going to be wanting as a backup to Edwards-Helaire. I do think that they'll go out and sign someone else. But if I have to pick between these 3, I'll definitely take some shots at Washington and Darwin Thompson, just because Washington could definitely step in as the first and second round back. And then if they have to, they'll use Darwin Thompson in the passing game. And just the hype on Darwin Thompson last year, and then it's completely fallen off this year, where he's a guy that no one's touching, which is kind of similar to another situation, which we'll talk about in a little bit for the Rams. But I think I'll definitely be targeting some of the backups in this offense. But it's different because I'm going to be spending a 15th round or later pick on a guy like that, and I'm not really expecting 1,000-yard season from these guys, because I am a little worried about the running back position in this offense, because I don't think it's as important as other offenses.
Yeah, and that's part of the reason I think why I'm taking the CEH side of this, is because he's going to be locked into a role. We know that. These other guys, I think it's going to be like the backfield last year. We're not going to know if it's DeAndre Washington, Darrell Williams, Darwin Thompson, whatever veteran they sign. So we're not going to. I think we can count on Washington, or I'm sorry, CEH, but the rest of them, I couldn't pick one right now. I mean, Washington was a nice fill-in for the Raiders last year and previous years from a fantasy perspective, but he's new to the offense as well. Darwin Thompson's a sixth-round pick. Darrell Williams had his moments, but he kind of went through this last year. So I think it's going to be a mess outside of Edwards-Helaire. He's the only one we're really going to count on week to week. So, I think maybe you'll end up overdrafting him if you take him fairly early, but I don't think he's going to be a complete bust for you.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if he'll be a complete bust, but I don't think he'll be worth that first-round pick. Probably not even the high second-round pick. So that's the Kansas City Chiefs. Obviously, we came into this podcast thinking that we were going to have a huge debate between Damien Williams and him, because I was huge on Damien Williams prior to the opt-out. Because he was going so late, and he's a guy that I did not see him just fully releasing the reins to Clyde Edwards-Helaire. I thought there was going to be a nice situation for him to actually be more productive than Edwards-Helaire had he played. But since he opted out, it made it a little bit more interesting for our debate here. But let's move on to the next one. So we got Baltimore Ravens. Last year was one of the most, if not the most, run heaviest offense in the league. Most of that accredited to Lamar Jackson, of course. But Mark Ingram had a steady, kind of underappreciated year last year. And so underappreciated that they went and drafted J.K. Dobbins this year. Mark Ingram right now, his ADP is at pick number 61. So that's about the fifth round in a 12-team league, the 5-6 turn. And then J.K. Dobbins is going at the end of that fifth round, beginning of the sixth round at ADP 71. So if you have to choose between one of those two for the Baltimore Ravens, which one are you picking?
Yeah, I'm going with Dobbins. I mean, it depends on the league style, what you're playing. I've been drafting a lot of best ball so far, and I've been taking Dobbins constantly. I think in a redraft league, this is going to be a mess to figure out. You're not going to know what weeks to start them maybe at first, but I could see some massive weeks from Dobbins. And we also have to remember this offseason that, or this season with all the COVID stuff going on, like either of these running backs could come down with it and miss 3 weeks at some point, which immediately just blows up the other's potential. So I kind of like both of them, but we're having to pick one here, part of this debate. So I'm going with Dobbins. He's cheaper. I think he has the bigger league winning upside. I mean, we saw Mark Ingram last year. He only had to deal with, he didn't have a lot of competition to deal with. It was Gus Edwards and Justice Hill, who are not, established players in the league. And he had his shot. He had a really good year, but it was not exactly a blow-up league-winning year. So I don't know. I think I'd rather take a little bit more volatility, go with Dobbins, especially in a best ball league, and he's cheaper. So that's where I'm going with there. I could see this really frustrating week to week, but I think it's worth the risk just being a part of this offense. Maybe they try to make sure Lamar's healthier this year, especially if they're winning every game again. So maybe they try to put it in the hands of the running backs even more this year, limit Lamar a little bit. And, Dobbins, he didn't do much at the combine, so that kind of cooled down his hype a little bit compared to the other running backs. But, it just seems like a natural fit going from Ohio State to the Baltimore offense. I could just see him running long touchdowns through open holes with, some motion and play action with Lamar. So I think there's a ton of potential for Dobbins. Ingram is the safer one, but I'll take the riskier, cheaper one in Dobbins, I think.
Do you think that either of these guys actually leads the team in rushing yards?
So I don't know. It's hard to know because the Ravens could start out 1-3, have a tough break to start the year, and all of a sudden, Lamar's running like crazy like he did last year. But I don't know. I think one of them could. Unless they just vulture each other too much. But if they're 4-1 and they're just steamrolling teams, I don't see why they wouldn't start easing in Lamar. Just keep them fresh. They're probably going to pass more with him as well in his second full year. So I think there's a shot. It's probably still Lamar unless one of these running backs just completely gets injured or, something happens like that.
Yeah, because last year it was Lamar. Lamar led the team in rushing, obviously in passing as well. But Mark Ingram, he wasn't very disappointing last year. He had five yard per carry average, 1,000 yard season, 10 touchdowns on the ground, chipped in 5 touchdowns through the air as well on 26 catches. So I'm kind of leaning towards Mark Ingram, and I don't like that you're kind of throwing away guys like Gus Edwards and Justice Hill, because if I do remember correctly, you were huge into Justice Hill last year. And a guy like Gus Edwards, he would come in during garbage time last year, but he ended up with 711 rushing yards. That's not something that you throw away. Like that's a decent NFL running back right there, with 2 touchdowns on the ground as well. So I think that this whole situation is going to be a little frustrating, and in redraft, I think I'm going to be avoiding it unless I can get the cheapest guy late. But in best ball, I'll be targeting guys like Mark Ingram, Gus Edwards, and J.K. Dobbins. Kind of, I'll be monitoring their prices a little bit, because I don't want to spend up too much on a guy that I'm only going to play in a best ball type situation. But I think, like you said, in a redraft league, I think it could be a little frustrating, because I do think that, Mark Ingram could start off the game, he could get a couple touchdowns, and then he just sits the rest of the game if they're blowing him out. And then J.K. Dobbins comes in, or even Gus Edwards or Justice Hill. Like, I think this could be a very frustrating backfield to kind of monitor and draft this year. And then you throw in the extra wrinkle of Lamar Jackson kind of vulturing some touchdowns as well on the ground. He had 7 touchdowns himself, 1,200 yards rushing, which is insane. That just doesn't make any sense at all. But I don't know. I just don't know if I want to take a chance on pretty much like a 3 to 4 headed monster coming out of this backfield. Now, I know that they were the most efficient run offense in the league last year, but obviously their schedule is going to get a little bit tougher. League is going to have a whole offseason to watch this offense and see if they can figure out how to stop and contain Lamar Jackson. And that could, spell doom for some of the running backs. So if I'm in a best ball, I'll be looking at this backfield. But if I'm in a redraft, unless I have to, I probably won't be taking any of them.
Yeah, I mean, there's just such a huge piece of the pie available here with this rushing ability, where if they do change something and Lamar rushes less, or they focus on one running back, I mean, it's just a massive season. So that's why I'm willing to take the risk, because if you do hit this one, it's huge. You mentioned Justice Hill. I was big on him as a late round flyer last year for sure. I wondered if they could do some kind of like when Ingram was in New Orleans, him and Kamara on the field at the same time. One of them doing some jet sweeps, other one running up the middle. I wondered if they could do that, and they could still do that now that they have Dobbins. I mean, maybe they get both him and Ingram on the field. So we'll see. There's a lot of ways they could go with this. I think Dobbins is way more versatile than Edwards and Hill, and that gives them a lot of opportunity to mix things up, because people are going to be ready for them this year. That doesn't mean they're going to stop them, but they're going to want to throw some wrinkles in there. So I don't know. I think if things click with J.K. Dobbins, it could be just you could really regret not taking him this year. With Ingram, he's safer, so I think you're probably going to be kind of happy where you get him. He's not going to win your league, but if you missed on running backs early, then maybe that's where you're taking him, just because he's a veteran presence. People, the teammates love him. He'll be on the field for sure. So he might be your safer pick if you dodged running backs early in drafts.
Yeah, I think that's what I would do if I have to. And one of these guys has to be my RB2. I think I would definitely want that to be Mark Ingram over J.K. Dobbins. I do think that it's a lot safer. But if I can, if I don't have to draft one of these as my RB2, then I would definitely be looking at one of them as my flex or my first running back off the bench to fill in as a buy. So that's definitely an interesting situation because of the added presence of Lamar Jackson. And all the talent in that backfield. So that's definitely one to keep an eye on, because I wouldn't be surprised if J.K. Dobbins continues to rise up and even be drafted ahead of Mark Ingram, especially whenever we get closer to the season. So that's the Baltimore Ravens. Let's move over to the Indianapolis Colts, who drafted Jonathan Taylor this past year. They also signed Phillip Rivers in the offseason. So they'll have a different quarterback and running back tandem this year going into the season. But what does that mean for a guy like Marlon Mack, who was a lot of guys' favorite, running back to pick up last year? He had a few flashes last year, But Jonathan Taylor was a beast at Wisconsin. He's a guy that can do it all. And he's a guy that just kind of looks like a running back whenever you look at him, and you kind of pair him with Phillip Rivers. And, we don't really know what to expect with this new Indianapolis Colts offense. Obviously, T.Y. Hilton's still there. They drafted Michael Pittman. So they have a lot of talent. They still have Jack Doyle as well. I don't know if this is Phillip Rivers' last stand, and they still have Jacoby Brissett as well. But what are you kind of looking at for this Indianapolis Colts backfield? Are you going to be willing to pay, a second to an early second to late second round pick on a guy like Jonathan Taylor, or will you just kind of wait it out and go for Marlon Mack?
No, Marlon Mack is one that I do not understand at all. I mean, I've seen some smart people touting him as a zero running back possibility. I suppose if Jonathan Taylor gets hurt, then great, Mack's back in the role. But I mean, I don't know. I've had Mack not a ton, but I had him on one team last year, and I had to rank him every week, and I didn't enjoy the Marlon Mack experience. I don't know about you, but if they got the lead, he got a bunch of carries, and he'd have a good week. But if they didn't have the lead from the start, he had some disappearing performances where you thought that he could have a nice week, and he gives you 0 in the passing game. I know there's some knocks on Taylor with his pass catching ability, but I don't know. Mack, I just don't see it on Mack. I think he's had his chance. I'm sure he had 1,000 yards last season. I get it, but there just weren't a lot of times where I was like, man, I'm glad I drafted Marlon Mack. It's just kind of, I'd rather take the unknown a little bit with Taylor. He's shown he's a big time workhorse at Wisconsin, and maybe his pass catching ability. Melvin Gordon wasn't a huge pass catcher at Wisconsin. Phillip Rivers locked onto him and started dumping the ball off. So if Taylor can give you anything in the passing game, I think he's got big potential. I do understand Mack because this is a really good offensive line, good coach, good play calling, all that. So it's kind of like the Ravens. This is a situation you want in on, but I'm kind of over Mack myself. I don't really even want the discount. I'll go for Taylor. He just went in my Rasball draft. I picked at 3.04 and he was already gone. So there are going to be some drafts where he goes really early. But if I can catch him kind of 3-4 turn range, I think that's about where he's going. If I did not get a running back first 2 rounds, if I went receiver or however it works out, I'm interested in Taylor. I just think he's not quite Saquon Barkley material as far as, prospect coming in, but there were some comps to Saquon. I just think he's a really good athlete. He's going to get the ball a ton. They're probably going to want to ease in Rivers a little bit. This might be his last year, like you said. So if Taylor looks good and they have the lead, I think he gets the lion's share of the carries here.
Yeah, so he's going, pick 34 in NFFC right now, which is RB 19 off the board. And I'm looking at the 4 running backs going ahead of him: Todd Gurley, Melvin Gordon, Leonard Fournette, and James Conner. I'm taking Taylor over all 4 of those every day.
Yeah, and I like Conner, but he's risen up quite a bit. I thought we were going to get him as a discount this year, and people have caught on. So I'm right there with you. I'd take the fresh legs here with Taylor on that one.
Yeah, and I also don't think that Marlon Mack is a guy that I'm going to be drafting either, because he seems like a prototypical handcuff to a guy like Jonathan Taylor. I think if Jonathan Taylor is healthy, he's going to be getting all the carries, and I don't think Marlon Mack is going to see the field because, like you said, his passing ability is pretty much non-existent. He had 14 catches on 17 targets last year. You're talking about a guy like Nyheim Hines, who is the passing down back in this offense. And he will not lose out to Marlon Mack in that ability. He had 44 catches on 58 targets last year, Nyheim Hines did. So I think this is a Jonathan Taylor, Nyheim Hines type of running back. Marlon Mack would be a guy like Tony Pollard or a guy like Darrell Henderson, who we'll talk about a little bit later, but obviously with less upside as well. So I think that he is pretty much a handcuff, and that is it. Now, there is the possibility that he gets traded. Maybe he gets traded to a team that definitely needs a running back, and maybe he can make an impact that way. But for me, it's Jonathan Taylor, and I think I'm right there with you on the price too. I think in some of the bigger high stakes league on NFFC, I wouldn't be surprised if he goes in the middle to early round 2, might even creep into round 1 as well. I was just on the clock on Rasbowl as well, and at the 2-3 turn, I was picking at the 12-13, and I was considering taking Jonathan Taylor there. So I do like him. I do like the fact that he's with Phillip Rivers. That's a veteran presence. He can come in, he can ask questions, And Phillip Rivers is going to notice the talent. He's going to see that this is a guy that's going to be good for their team. And if he sees that, then he's going to try and get him involved any way he can. And we've seen, especially with the wide receivers also on this team, T.Y. Hilton, he's struggled to stay healthy. Behind him, Paris Campbell, who everyone was on last year, he struggled to stay healthy as well. They got Michael Pittman, who I talked about. And then, they got Zach Pascal, Chester Rogers, Jack Doyle, who struggled to stay healthy. Like, this could be an offense kind of like the Jacksonville Jaguars last year, where Leonard Fournette did everything for that team. I could see Jonathan Taylor kind of being that guy this year for the Indianapolis Colts. So he's a guy that I might even go out on a limb and say I'd rather have him over Clyde Edwards-Helaire.
Yeah, I mean, I guess if you knew that he was going to get the pass catching work, then I could see that argument pretty easily. Yeah, I mean, they were neck and neck going into the draft as far as prospects go. I mean, Taylor was ahead of him until the Chiefs took him, so took Edwards-Helaire. So, yeah, I mean, I can see that. I mean, this is the one on the list, I believe, that I have the biggest split on. I like Taylor, and I don't have any interest in Mac. I mean, because you look at these backfields that sustain two good running backs. It's more like the Melvin Gordon, Austin Eckler 60-40 split, where Eckler's getting a ton of receiving work. You don't see so many fantasy relevant backfields where the guy getting 40% isn't catching passes. So I just don't see how Mac pays off without a massive injury. So yeah, I'm there with you. No interest in Mac. Hines is probably a good gamble late in drafts. I agree with that one as well. So I really like Taylor. And I think it's kind of the story of these so far for me. I'd rather take the upside because, there are some running backs later in the draft you can get for just solid production. You can take some shots on a Jordan Howard or a Tevin Coleman. I mean, there's some players out there that you can get pretty cheap, and I hope you get 10, 12 carries and touchdown out of them. We're trying to find the league winners, and that's why I'd rather have Taylor, someone like that here.
Yeah, so we're about halfway through our discussion here, but I know that we had talked about this, kind of privately, about the nuances of the season and how weird this season's going to be. There's going to be a lot of pushback, I think, on Twitter and other places as well that are going to say, look, this is a rookie running back. He's not going through a prototypical offseason. He's not going to be able to go in and practice with his new quarterbacks or his new coordinators. He's pretty much just going to have his head in the book, just looking at the playbook, but not really being able to practice with the team. Does that mean anything to you? Does that change your opinion? If say come September, obviously we don't have any preseason games, but if come September, the quarterbacks are at home quarantined, and they're just kind of catching passes from coaches and backup players elsewhere as well. Does that kind of sway the needle to you for kind of some of these veteran guys, or do you think that the talent will eventually win out?
At running back, it doesn't bother me quite as much. I think they can adapt quicker than a receiver could. I mean, it's hard to tell. This is going to be a crazy season. What I would say is that I don't think these teams want to just waste a year out of their rookies. So if they drafted Jonathan Taylor with a high second-round pick, they're going to want to use him. I don't think they're just going to say, we had a bad, no offseason. Taylor's just going to ride the bench for the first 6 weeks. Like, I don't think that's going to happen. And then, I mean, everyone has the same chance at getting COVID-19, missing a couple weeks. Like, it could be a rookie, it could be a veteran. But if it's anything like baseball, these rosters are going to be thinned out after like a week or two, right?
Hey, let's not talk about baseball. This is a football podcast.
That's another story. But they seem to be just as organized as baseball. So, but I mean, if you got Taylor and Mac hits the 3-week IR, I mean, I think they're going to play Taylor. So I am not buying into it as much as some people are. Now, if it's a receiver, Brandon Ayuk, counting on him to be the number one receiver in San Francisco with that playbook, maybe that's a little different. But running backs, I mean, as long as the scheme isn't a bad fit for them, like kind of Darrell Henderson last year, I think they can figure it out pretty quickly.
So I think one of the things, I know we touched on baseball. This isn't a baseball podcast, but one of the things in baseball that kind of came out after, summer camp started over was the fact that some of these guys just said, look, we did some backyard baseball. Like we all got together, we got a group of 10 guys and we went out and we played some games. So it's not like they're sitting there, sitting on a computer like us, just kind of talking. I do think that there's, some side sessions going on, especially with a guy like Phillip Rivers. I think that, as soon as he can get away from his 10 kids, I think that he's going to be able to spend some time, or want to spend some time with some of the new guys, especially coming into a new team. But I think that's kind of, where I'm at as well. I'm not as worried, especially from a running back position. I guess from a wide receiver position, I'm a little bit more worried, but I also think whenever you're talking about a guy like Jalen Reagor or Michael Pittman, where they really don't have an alternative, to the rookie wide receiver, or Brandon Ayuk, like you said, like they're gonna need them to perform right off the bat. So, and especially for running backs as well. So I'm right there with you. I'm not worried that this offseason I know it's going to be different. But this is all they know. This is their first year in the league. It's not like, they're having to adjust completely from one year to another. So I do think that the talent is going to win out, especially in situations like Indianapolis, where Taylor is by far the better running back to Marlon Mack, and then maybe some of the other situations that we'll touch on in a little bit. But I know that's one of the situations that a lot of people are looking at whenever they're drafting. They're like, look, I don't want anything to do with rookies because I don't know how this offseason is going to play out.
Yeah, I mean, the way I look at it, like just take Denver, Jerry Jeudy. Like, I mean, if Cortland Sutton gets hurt, like they're not going to just put in Deshaun Hamilton and him. You know what I mean? Like Jerry Judy's better than Deshaun Hamilton, so he's going to get the ball on the field. Yeah, hot take. We'll put that one on Twitter.
Yeah.
But no, really. I mean, the rosters might be just in shambles after 2 weeks, and they're going to have to play the rookies if they're the ones standing anyway. So I think the smart coaches will find a way to get these players in there and up to speed. Maybe we see some simplified playbooks or something. So.
Yeah, and they can always incorporate some of the stuff that they did in college as well. So that always helps, especially running backs coming into the NFL as well. So let's move on to the next situation. We got the Detroit Lions, who have not had a 1,000-yard rusher, I don't believe, since Barry Sanders. So this seems like an irrelevant conversation, but we'll do it anyways.
We got one. I thought Kerryon got there. No, he didn't.
Nope. So we got DeAndre Swift going at pick number 53 in ADP. Or Kerryon Johnson, aforementioned Kerryon Johnson, going at pick 109. I remember just, what was it, last year, all the hype on Kerryon Johnson, and what do we have coming into this year? They go out, they spend a high pick on DeAndre Swift, and we're kind of in the same situation as we were a couple of years ago with this Lions backfield. I mean, Matthew Stafford is a guy that's going to be a top 15 quarterback in fantasy. So you would expect that one of these running backs would help him along his way to being a top 15 quarterback. But that's just something that the Detroit Lions just haven't had to do recently. Do you think that changes now with the addition of DeAndre Swift? Does that make you want to go out and pay that price for him? Or would you just wait on Kerryon Johnson, or are you just completely avoiding this situation?
Yeah, so I'm trying to force myself to pick one, and all these. This is the one where I don't want to pick either of them, really. I think I'm going to take Kerryon just because he's later. I really don't have much faith in him. But if you look at where Swift is going around pick 53, I mean, you've got receivers in that range like Sutton, DJ Chark, Keenan Allen, Devontae Parker, even Zach Ertz there. I mean, I'd much rather have those players than Swift, I think. And you've got other running backs in that area. I mean, I'd rather have Cam Akers. We'll get to him later. Maybe not David Montgomery, but there's some running backs there too that aren't. I don't think Swift is much better than. I just don't like the fit. I haven't seen past proof that Detroit is going to use him properly, that they're going to use him like an Alvin Kamara. They're going to feed him passes. You have, like you said, Kerryon there to get in the way somewhat. They've got a bunch of backs they gave work to last year when Kerryon got hurt. And it's possible that Kerryon gets hurt this year and it's just all Swift and we look stupid for fading him. I mean, people were mocking him to the Chiefs at the end of the first round. So he's obviously talented. He's a great player. He's going to be a good player for a long time. But I don't see for fantasy perspective that the Lions are going to feature him enough. So I'm going Kerryon. I probably am not going to draft him in any league either. I might get Swift in some leagues where he falls, but at least where you're looking at Kerryon, you're more in like the Sony Michel kind of range. I mean, it's a little easier to take a stab at him there. So for the sake of argument, I'll go Kerryon Johnson, but I just don't trust the Lions to give us a good fantasy running back for 16 games.
Yeah, I think I'm right there with you. I think I want to avoid this situation completely if possible. Now, I will say that a lot of people are kind of touting DeAndre Swift just because they think that he'll come in and be way more productive than on Johnson, possibly be better in the passing game as well. But this is a guy that only caught 30 passes in his sophomore year and then 24 passes in his junior year. So I'm not really looking at DeAndre Swift as a pass catcher per se. I think him and Kerryon Johnson are really similar, which is kind of weird for the DeAndre line or the Detroit Lions to go out and draft a running back that kind of compares to Kerryon Johnson. So I mean, if I have to choose one of them, I do think that I will lean Swift just because, he's new. We've seen what we've seen from Kerryon Johnson. He hasn't been able to stay healthy. I don't think his upside is that great either. But I'm also looking at kind of the guys that are going around DeAndre Swift. Kareem Hunt, who has a timeshare with the league leading rushing performer last year, and Nick Chubb. Raheem Mostert, who has his question marks with San Francisco. Mark Ingram, who we talked about. Ronald Jones. Those are all guys going right after him. And I do think if I have to pick between Swift and those guys, I think Swift probably has the better upside. Maybe not from Mostert based on what we saw last year, but I think he does have better upside than Kerryon Johnson. But I am worried about the running back position in Detroit because I don't think that they know how to properly use a running back. And with Matt Stafford, he's going to sling it. I mean, we've seen that for the past, almost a decade, if you can believe that. And now that they have Kenny Golladay, Marvin Jones, Tyler Hawkinson coming in his second year as well. So, I think they have the weapons in Detroit. They have Danny Amendola as well to make it, where Matthew Stafford's a top 10 fantasy quarterback. And I don't think that they can sustain, an RB2 along with Matt Stafford being a top 10 fantasy quarterback.
Yeah, and I mean, we've been frustrated with how they used Kerryon when he was in there. I mean, Swift is a better prospect. I think most people agree with that coming in, better pass catcher, but they didn't use Johnson right. I mean, it was frustrating owning him in leagues. So I just don't see why it's going to change now that there's two of them competing with each other. They probably just were decimated with injury last year, and they were like, man, we can't go through this again at running back. We got to spend some draft capital on one. So, yeah, I don't know. I think it's more of a split backfield than we would like, and we probably are just hoping for a carry-on injury, which is possible. But, yeah, Swift is not one of my targets this year. I'd take most of the other rookies in that range.
Yeah, and I think even if one of these guys misses a certain amount of time due to COVID or due to injury or anything like that, I just don't think that the upside, even with one of them out, is enough to make me want to pay that price either. So, whenever you talk about a guy like Jonathan Taylor, if Marlon Mack is out or if Naheem Hines is out, like I think his price skyrockets and I think his performance skyrockets. Same thing with Dobbins and Ingram. I think if one of those guys is out, then you're getting close to an RB1 if they don't have to split that time. But in Detroit, even if DeAndre Swift was the only guy, I think that he'd probably be going too high just because of how the Detroit Lions have played their offensive philosophy the past few years and how Matt Stafford kind of likes to play.
Yeah, and maybe I'm reading the situation wrong, but I mean, if they had got someone like Jonathan Taylor, I think I would be higher on him. Like, I know that Detroit wants to play defense and run the ball. That's kind of what they can't because their defense isn't good enough. But I could see them if they can.
And they can't run the ball either. So.
Yeah, right. But Taylor could maybe help with that. But I mean, I could see if the defense made some steps and they could really just pound the ball. And I think that's how they want to play. But I don't see that as being a good role for Swift. And like I said, I just don't trust the pass catching role is going to be creative enough to get him the ball, 60 times this year. So we'll see. He's a fun player. I think in Dynasty, I'd be much more willing to take the chance on him, and maybe they have new coaches next year. But for redraft, I'm not real excited about him.
Yeah. Well, let's talk about some excitement then. So let's go to LA. Let's talk about the Rams. So last year's cover boy of the hype train was Darrell Henderson. This year he's going at ADP 126, and then they obviously got rid of Todd Gurley, and then they go and draft Cam Akers as well, who's got an ADP of 56. So this is an offense that a couple of years ago was the talk of the town. They were hiring the Los Angeles Rams as water boys as head coaches around the league. You know all about that because your Bengals coach is that. So, but last year they kind of hit a wall. They get rid of Brandon Cooks this year. So you got Cooper Kupp, you got Robert Woods, Jared Goff is still there. The offensive line still looks a little bit decent, but they lose Todd Gurley. So who's going to pick up that production? Cam Akers or Darrell Henderson?
Yeah, so this is the one where I probably like both of them, and I'm going to force myself to pick one. I mean, actually, I don't really like Darrell Henderson that much, but I pick 126. Like, I'll take that risk all day. I mean, that's super late. Maybe Akers comes in and just can't stay on the field. I mean, you never know with rookies. So I'll take that chance on Henderson, but I like Akers. The post-draft hype, I wasn't quite there with him. I think he's a little bit below the top running backs in this class just as a prospect, but I think ADP 56 is really reasonable for him. And so I'm probably taking Akers between these two. You're paying up a little for sure, but we want that touchdown roll. That's what kept Gurley going last year. They've stopped throwing to the running backs, at least last year. It'll be interesting to see if that's because Gurley was, bad knees. They were just trying to keep him more straight line in the running game or what. But we really want that touchdown roll because that's what kept Gurley going. So I think Cam Akers would be the more likely to get that role. Henderson just didn't seem like a good fit for the team. We'll see if he picks things up this year or if they adapt to him, maybe, in a secondary role, get some more touches and look like he did at Memphis. But I'm going Akers. I think he has probably, let's see, over, who all have we talked about here? I wouldn't put him over Taylor or CEH, but I think he's got more breakout potential than Swift, probably than Dobbins. I just think there's a chance that Akers is the lead back really quick, and maybe he puts up kind of a Todd Gurley from last year's season, which was a pretty good season. It just wasn't good for where you picked Gurley. If you can get Akers towards the 5th or 6th round, then you'll take that season all day from him.
Yeah, so Cam Akers is going as RB25 right now. Let me see who you'd rather have him over. Would you rather have him over Le'Veon Bell?
Yeah.
James Conner?
Connor's just weird because I think he could really pay off if it works out. There's just been so many injuries. He's got a lot of competition. Is Connor really going that close to Akers right now?
No. So I'm trying
Connor's pretty far ahead, right?
Yeah, I'm trying to see how high you're going to push Akers up.
Yeah, I think maybe you put Connor just because he's had a really elite season. If he can shake the injury bug and with Roethlisberger back, there's a lot of ifs for Connor, but he could really have a monster season. So I'd put him above Akers, but I don't love it. The ADP kind of solves that problem for me.
Yeah. What about Chris Carson and David Johnson?
I would put Carson ahead of Akers. I don't even know what to do with David Johnson. I haven't drafted him yet, so maybe that tells you all you need to know. But he deserves to go in a certain range, David Johnson. I take a receiver over him every time.
All right, so you're probably right there around the RB20 range for Cam Akers. So my big thing with the Rams offense, and let's take a step back into last year, because like I said, last year, Darrell Henderson was the cover boy for the hype train. He was going so early that, a lot of people, you were either in or you were out on him. I was a guy that was out because I didn't understand the hype and how he would be able to hurdle a guy like Todd Gurley. And lo and behold, that did not work. I'm pretty sure he was one of the first cuts after the first couple weeks in the fantasy football season last year. But now you fast forward to this year, and what has changed? Todd Gurley is gone. They go out and they draft Cam Akers relatively high, which I'll definitely admit. But Darrell Henderson is still the same guy. I know he had a little bit of an injury concern last year, but he should be fully healthy. He's had 1 year under his belt in the NFL. And what if Cam Akers is this year's Darrell Henderson? I mean, it's possible. Yeah. So if Darrell Henderson can come in, show that he learned from last year, and show that the coaching staff can trust him, then I think at pick 126, this is a steal. And I'm going to be taking it every single time because, you're talking about guys like Latavius Murray and Zach Moss and Phillip Lindsay are guys that are kind of going in that range. And the upside of Darrell Henderson in this offense alone is well worth that pick. And his only competition is a rookie running back coming in. There's no one else on this offense. There's no Todd Gurley this year. So this could be a situation where, Akers this probably isn't going to be a one-man show, but I think if one of these guys shows something, then it could be a 60-40, 70-30 split.
Yeah, like I said, I am in on Henderson. I got him in Scott Fish Bowl. I am picking him a ton. If I just have to pick one, I'm going Akers. But no, I'm right there with you. I mean, he doesn't even need Akers to flop at 126. I mean, it could, like you said, just 60-40 split, and you're paying off with Henderson. We haven't talked about Malcolm Brown, I think, for a reason. I think everyone brings him up. The coaches like him. They want him on the team. They signed him to that tender. People bring him up a lot, but he has not produced at all in his career. I mean, he's it's just, if you look at his game log, it's just terrible. So I just don't see why this year it's going to happen when they've drafted 2 running backs pretty early the last few years. So yeah, I think there's a chance it's a 60-40 split one way or the other, and Henderson pays off big time. I think Akers could take it and run with it. Maybe Henderson was just a bad fit for this offense, but even the offense has changed some. We expect them to go more 2 tight end, less 3 wide. They've lost Brandon Cooks, so there's some changes here. Maybe this fits Henderson more. Maybe they try to get them both on the field at the same time and use Henderson creatively. So, yeah, I think they're both really good picks. I've taken the upside in Akers, but I'm ending up with Henderson in just about every draft. I mean, he seems like he should be going 30 picks earlier, shouldn't he? I mean, I'm scrolling down the list here, but 120 just seems outrageous for him.
Yeah, I think, once we get into the big drafts, I could definitely see him going over guys like Marlon Mack, who's going at pick number 95 right
That's
now.
what I was gonna say. Why do you want Marlon Mack instead of him? I don't get it.
Yeah, yeah.
So.
Tevin Coleman, that's a guy that is kind of going to burn you already for Scott Fishbowl, but we'll talk about that on another podcast. But yeah, so it doesn't look like either of these running backs also has an edge one way or the other in the passing down role. Just based on their college stats, it looks like they're pretty much relatively the same type of guy. 20 receptions each year for 3 years. Obviously, Akers was at a bigger college than Henderson, but it's not like one of these guys has the edge, based off of their previous stats coming into the season. So for me, I will be definitely taking Darrell Henderson later on in the draft. I don't think I want to spend, a 4th round pick on a guy like Cam Akers when he could just be Darrell Henderson of last year. It could just be a complete bust. Now, I do think that there is going to be a split, like I said. I don't think that either of these guys is going to completely run away with the job. So that kind of makes it even better to if you get one of them, you're going to get something out of them.
Yeah, and you're right about the pass catching, though. I mean, if they don't get that back and they're splitting, however many, 14 touchdowns, then it may not be that exciting for fantasy purposes. But if they get that pass catching back like we did pre-2019 with Gurley, then they could both pay off. Honestly, they could both be starters in fantasy leagues. So that's going to be a big thing to watch. We won't have any camps to watch hardly, but if they're talking about getting the running backs involved in the passing game, that's going to be huge because that's the quickest way, even in really standard leagues. That's the quickest way to boost your stats as a running back is to contribute in the passing game.
Yeah, so speaking of passing down backs, let's move over to the Tampa Bay Bucks. So they went out and they drafted Keyshawn Vaughn. I don't know if you know, but they kind of revamped their whole team a little bit. There's a guy called Tom Brady that's going to be calling the signals there. No more Jameis Winston, no more 30-30 talk on Twitter for Jameis Winston this year. So Tom Brady's going to be at the helm. Keyshawn Vaughn is a guy that they drafted this year. He's going at pick number 90. And then Ronald Jones, Rojo, a lot of people, you're either a Rojo truther or you just completely hate the guy, going to pick 68. I know Keyshawn Vaughn has COVID right now, so hopefully he gets better and fully recovers from that. But if we're talking both these guys are healthy coming into camp and we're looking at week 1 and they both, have shown in practice that they're both healthy completely, which guy are you going after in your drafts?
I think this is probably the one I have the least read on out of all of them. So I would probably default to the later one. But, I mean, Jones, it's tough with Jones because he has been a huge disappointment. He's looked just kind of lost at times. But, I mean, he did also put up, 724 yards and 6 touchdowns last year. He's still really young. I believe he's 23. He had 300 yards receiving. That's better than some pretty good running backs have done. So, like, there's stuff there that I understand with Jones. And I think there's a chance that Vaughn could, he wasn't one of my favorite running backs coming into the draft. And if he's behind Jones, Jones looks good. If Dare Ogunbowale, I think I got that. If he looks good in the passing game, then I could see Vaughn just completely getting squeezed out. So I am not taking really a whole lot of either. Jones has kind of shot up lately. There was a while where you probably could have got him 20 picks later, I bet. I don't know. There's been a lot of Twitter momentum for him. So this is the one that I'm going to go back and forth on. And I, man, now that I say it, I don't know what Vaughn's going to contribute this year. So I think I'm going to go with Ronald Jones. I don't think I'm really going to draft him very much in my teams.
Yeah, I think I'm right there with you on this one. I don't really want either of them. Now I know that a running back in a Tom Brady offense is a guy that has definitely been valuable in the past. James White comes to mind, Danny Woodhead, Rex Burkhead, guys like that. But unless Keyshawn Vaughn can come in and be a James White right off the bat, which I don't think is possible, then I don't really see him fitting in this offense this year. Rojo is a guy that could be productive, but he's a guy that has all this talent, just hasn't really put it together for the past couple of years. Now, he's still young. Maybe it was because he was playing with a dummy and Jameis Winston. But, he's got to pick up the offense, and he's got to gain the trust of Tom Brady. And without an offseason, kind of going into it blind, I'm a little worried about the running back position on this offense. So I think both of these guys are guys that I'm going to be avoiding. I just do think that there's so much uncertainty around them that I'd rather go with guys like Mark Ingram, who's going right above Ronald Jones, James White, who's going a lot later, Darius Guice. There's a whole lot of different targets that I'd rather take than a guy in Tampa Bay. Now, I know that the running back in a Tom Brady offense, like I said, could be productive. I just don't know which one it would be. And I kind of am with you. I wouldn't be surprised if it was Dare Ogunbowale, honestly.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think Vaughn profiles as the James White. And, when we wrote him up pre-combine and post-combine, it was just he's one of the older running back prospects at age 23. He just didn't really wow anyone at the combine. He's just kind of a solid running back, but there wasn't anything that jumped off the page with him. So I don't see him having a defined role necessarily. And if the other backs just excel in their role, I mean, he could just get left out. Maybe he chips in a little bit everywhere and gives you a good season. But yeah, I think comparing this backfield to the Patriots backfields would be a mistake. I just think with these weapons, I mean, if they don't get the ball to Godwin and Evans, it's a huge mistake. So I think we're going to see it's going to be a Brady offense, but I don't think I would just plug and play the Patriots kind of distribution into this year.
Yeah, I think I'm right there with you. It's unfortunate because a running back in a Tom Brady offense is a guy that has definitely been rosterable and startable every week. But this year, I just don't know which one it would be. And if it is one or the other, I can't spend that type of price, knowing that if he's not the guy, then he's going to be riding the bench. I can't spend that type of price. So let's go over to his old division mate, the Buffalo Bills. They go out and they drafted Zach Moss this year in the draft, so he's got an ADP of 116. And then Devin Singletary, the hype guy last year as well, going at pick number 57. So Josh Allen coming back. He's going to vulture some touchdowns. He's going to vulture some rushing yards in this offense as well. But which one of these two guys are you going to be targeting in your draft?
Yeah, it's funny because I think right after the NFL draft, I would have said Singletary. I liked what I saw out of him last year. Once he kind of got, Frank Gore out of the way, he really started seeing a lot more snaps. He looked a lot better. He showed some flashes in the passing game, although they didn't use him as much as they should have. But I would have said after the draft Singletary, I think. And just the more I thought about this, I mean, Moss might end up with the Frank Gore role here. Be a better version of Frank Gore. No offense, he's just an old player, but he may have a little bit more spark than Gore. And if he gets the touchdown role, if he gets the grind out the clock role, I mean Singletary, I believe, is only 5'7". He could settle into the complimentary role pretty quickly. So I'm taking Moss, especially with this difference in price. I mean, I think Moss is someone, if he keeps getting drafted around here, I'm going to end up with him a ton. I mean, you're looking at other running backs in that range, Philip Lindsay, which there's a lot of people on him, but Duke Johnson, Pollard, who's a true handcuff. So I really like Moss in this range. He may get shot up the board as we get closer to real drafts, and then maybe I need to reconsider. But no, I like it. I think Josh Allen is maybe due a little bit of touchdown regression. Maybe he doesn't run in as many, and we're looking probably at Zach Moss for those touchdowns. So if the Bills are winning, if they're ahead, I think Moss is going to be a really good value this year, and I'm going to end up with him a lot.
Yeah, and this is a division that has completely changed. I mean, you got Miami who went out and drafted Tua. New England no longer has Tom Brady. They have Cam Newton, and then the Jets are the Jets. So I think that this is a team that could run away with the division. The one thing that I am worried about, even if he does take Frank Gore's role, we saw at the beginning of the year Frank Gore was pretty much the only guy on the field, and Devin Singletary could barely get on the field. But towards the end of the year, I do believe that it was Singletary's job for pretty much the rest of the way. Singletary scored 2 touchdowns on the ground. Frank Gore scored 2 touchdowns on the ground, and Josh Allen scored 9. That's a very scary distribution. It's nowhere near the distribution that it was in Baltimore that we talked about a little bit earlier, with Lamar Jackson contributing to the rushing yards. And if that continues to happen, then that's going to be an issue. And that's probably why I'm out on Devin Singletary, because I don't think that he will be viable week in and week out as an RB2. And that's kind of what you have to pay up for him. Unless you go wide receiver, then he's your RB1, which is even more scary. Now, I will say that he was very productive, 5 yards per carry, 775 yards. He only started 8 games, so half a season. Didn't play in 4 of them as well. Had 2 touchdowns through the air, but yeah, I think I'm with you on Zach Moss. If I have to take a running back in this situation, I think it would be Zach Moss. I'm a huge fan of him, especially in Dynasty. He's a guy that I do think is more talented than Singletary for sure. But I am really worried about Josh Allen, because I can remember time in and time again, Josh Allen just doing like a 1-yard sneak, and everyone was just like, what about Singletary? What about Singletary? And I could see us saying that same thing. What about Singletary, or what about Moss? Like, Josh Allen, you don't need to do those 1-yard quarterback sneaks. And he was really effective last year. So that could be a deciding factor for me between those two. Just kind of take the later guy, see if Zach Moss kind of, contributes and maybe becomes a Frank Gore type role where there is a split. But I am really worried about the touchdown distribution on the ground.
Yeah, and I would say maybe it's just anecdotal, but there were a couple times where it was like down to the 1-yard line, Frank Gore stuffed, Josh Allen runs it in. So if Moss can convert on those, maybe that changes some. I will say with Moss, I didn't love him a whole lot coming into the NFL draft. PlayerProfiler.com still has the crying Jordan face for him because he participated at the combine, ran a 4.65 40. He said he injured himself, but that sounds like something you might say when you're on a 4.65 40. So
it sounds like he comps to Frank Gore very well.
It's possible. His best comparable is Monte Ball. You remember him? For the
oh my goodness,
so that's scary too. So I don't know. Moss was kind of a bruiser, but also was pretty good in the passing game. But he played at Utah, so not the best competition. So there's some red flags on him. But at that draft range, I'll take a shot. Maybe we get, maybe he even gets the 60% of the split and the touchdowns. So I just think there's a lot of upside, and he fits the Bills' scheme, I think, just the way they want to play if things go right. So, yeah, I'm going Moss pretty easily here. It's a shame, though, because I like Singletary.
Yeah, I think I'm right there with you as well. So I know we talked about it off the top of the show, but if you're on Reddit, definitely go check out Ryan Heath's piece on why you should not be drafting Clyde Edwards-Helaire in the first round. So that was a lot of fun this week. And Erik, what else is going on at the site? I know everything's kind of up in limbo. If baseball is any indication, then football is going to be in for a lot of changes and everything a little bit different this year. So what's going on at the site, and what can people look forward to?
Yeah, real quick, back to Ryan's article on Reddit. He really kind of like poked the beehive on this one, whatever the phrase is, because the comments, I mean, there are people equally mad at him that, saying that CEH is not a first-round pick, people equally mad on the other. Like, everyone's mad about this. So there's still a lot to figure out, I think, with CEH, but it's good stuff. Just check out the article, or the comments. You'll see what I mean. But yeah, so we're kind of the draft guide. We're going to be pushing it back a little further. We just, with the preseason canceled, with so much uncertainty, I think a lot of us are going to be pushing our drafts back pretty far into the offseason. If anyone has drafted best balls so far, the first opt-out was kind of like, oh man, I hope I did not have someone on 10 of my best ball teams that opts out. So it's kind of scary. So we're going to push some content back. So we'll do a big push as we get more into mid to late August. But we're putting out the team previews every day right now. We're up to the Vikings. So we're about halfway through, maybe a little more. So keep checking them out. We're going to try to we'll definitely keep the podcasts going. So tune in for those. We'll do some more live streams. But as far as rankings and the draft guide, we're pushing that back a little closer towards the start of the season just because this stuff's changing so quickly. So I'm going to try to get an article out once a week, maybe as news starts coming out, just to talk about, opt-outs and people on the COVID list and all kinds of stuff, because there's going to be a lot to keep up with. So we'll try to help you out that way on the site. But yeah, if you want to support the site, Pitcher List Plus, PL Plus, we're part of the Pitcher List Network, and you can go to our site, click PL Plus up top. If you want to support the site, you can. It gives you access to the Discord channel. You get fantasy baseball as well with Pitcher List. It's a really good deal. So check that out. But yep, we're just trying to roll with the punches here, stay flexible, and fingers crossed that we make it to September 10th, I believe. That's the first game.
Yeah, definitely go check out the PL Plus. Discord is probably the best part of the whole site. You get access to all the Pitcher List stuff, all the QB List stuff. There is a Plaid channel, which is Pitcher List After Dark. A lot of people it's a voice channel. There's usually live streaming. There's a lot of MLB The Show talk, a lot of just baseball and football talk. It's a whole lot of fun. There's so many different people in that chat that you get to be able to, interact with. It's a lot of fun. There's a lot of bots as well. So we have generated daily MLB lineups. We have generated every article. So you get an alert if you set up those alerts as well. So it's a lot of fun. Definitely probably one of the best parts about being a part of the community for sure. But yeah, it's a lot of fun. We don't know what's in store for the football season. We don't know what's in store for baseball. Everything could change tomorrow. We just kind of don't know, but we're here to kind of still provide some analysis. I will give you one tip. If you are drafting right now, make sure it's a best ball. That's really all I want to say right now, is because I don't even know if I'm going to do a regular money football league. Like, unless it's best ball, I don't want to deal with the headache, because I'm dealing with it right now with baseball, and I have like all my Reds and all my Orioles and Marlins are still in my lineups for this week. So if that is any indication, then I'm really nervous about this season. But hey, we're here to give you the content that you need, and just like the CEH debate, we'll be coming out with some more podcasts and stuff like that too. So yeah, definitely go check us out for sure.
Yep. And thanks for listening, everyone, at the QB List on Twitter. And yeah, join us for the next live stream. It's a lot of fun.